Hey guys, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about secondary function. This is kind of a microcosm of the development of Western harmony as a whole. Over and over through the years, we see composers try something new with the 5 chord, then later realize they can apply it to other things too. The dominant 7th was popular long before any other 7th chords were in widespread use. Using the 5 dominant and minor keys predates modal interchange by so long that we don't even really think of it as modal interchange. And even things we haven't talked about yet, like chord tensions and tritone substitutions, were first introduced to interact with the 5 chord. If functional harmony is a ship, the 5 chord is the captain. It gets all the coolest toys and it gets them before anyone else. So it should come as no surprise that the earliest secondary dominants were mostly 5 of 5, but if you look closely, there's actually another way to take the 5 out of that equation. Eventually, composers started asking, if I can have a 5 of 6, can I have a 6 of 6? How about a 4 of 6? And the answer is, kinda? It's complicated, and it doesn't work quite the same way as secondary dominance, but we're musicians, since when has complicated stopped us? At its heart, this is a question of chord functions. Remember, there are 3 primary functions: tonic, dominant, and subdominant. Other dominant function chords are easy. If you can have a 5 of 6, you can have a 7 of 6. It works exactly the same way on exactly the same principles. It's basically the same chord anyway. Secondary tonic function, on the other hand, doesn't really exist. You could argue that tonicization, the feeling of resolution you get from a secondary dominant moving to its target, is a form of secondary tonic function, so resolving a 5 of 6 to 6 makes it the 1 of 6, but that's kind of a stretch. You might have a stronger case when referring to deceptive resolutions of secondary dominants, where the 5-7 of 5 resolves to the 3 minor, which you could then call the 6 minor of 5, but I don't tend to hear people talk about it that way. It's unnecessarily convoluted, and I doubt the listener would hear it as anything other than a non-functional secondary dominant. Where things get interesting is in secondary subdominant function. For instance, in the following progression, you could pretty easily argue that G minor was serving as the 4 minor of D rather than the 2 minor of F. It's a little dicey because subdominant function isn't directional, so when you hear the G minor, it sounds like a 2, but then when it goes to the A7, you can kind of retroactively interpret it as a subdominant preparation. You'd have to look at the surrounding context to determine what the listener is most likely to pick up on, but I think you'd probably have a pretty reasonable case. But secondary 4s are still pretty rare. What you're much more likely to encounter is a secondary 2, most often wrapped up in a construct known as a 2-5. This is one of those rare, lovely times in music where you can tell exactly what something is just by the name. It's a 2 chord, followed by a 5 chord, usually resolving to 1. The primary 2-5 is a great way to quickly establish tonality, and borrowing it for secondary dominant progressions gives you a much stronger sense of resolution. While many examples exist, perhaps one of the best is a progression known as the Bird changes after Charlie Bird Parker, which goes something like this. We're in C, so those C major 7s are 1 chords and the G 7s are 5s. The D minor 7s are 2s, and you'll see we already have some 2-5s forming, which we'll mark with this bracket. That F7 we'll ignore, it's just a blues thing, but the rest? The rest are all 2-5s. In the first staff we have a circle of 2-5s resolving into each other, while in the second staff we have a series of non-functional 2-5s moving down a half step at a time. This feeds right into the third staff's long primary 2-5, then at the end we turn around and do it all over again. Listen to it one more time and really try to follow the chords. So why do we prefer the 2 over the 4? Well, there are a couple reasons. The simplest answer is that these are popular in jazz. Jazz uses mostly 7th chords, and as we said in the subdominant function video, when you're using 7th chords, the 2 is a stronger subdominant sound because it doesn't contain the 3rd degree of the scale, which is a harbinger of tonic function. But this progression has been in use for hundreds of years, long predating jazz, so there has to be more to it than that. Another interesting trait of 2/5s is that the movement of the bass notes is the same as in the resolution from 5 to 1. This gives the progression a pleasing symmetrical feel. There's also the matter of voice leading. The 2 moves more smoothly to the 5 because it has more notes in common, and again because the harmonic distance is equivalent, you get nice parallels between the 2/5 and the 5/1. In both cases, the 3rd degree of the old chord becomes the 7th degree of the new chord, and the 7th degree of the old one drops a half step to become the 3rd degree of the new one. The root stays where it is to become the new 5th, while the 5th moves down a whole step to become the new root. If you didn't follow all that, don't worry, the details aren't that important. The point is that the voice leading symmetry is incredibly appealing to improvisers and soloists, which again helps explain why jazz guys like it so much. And that's secondary function. Try the exercises, join our mailing list for scans of all our episodes, and keep on rockin'.